Hello and welcome to another edition of the Mexican Soccer Show. My name is Cesar Hernandez, and today is all about the CCL. We're going to talk about Medica versus Toronto. We're going to talk about New York Red Bulls versus Chivas. But before we get into that, let me introduce tonight's guest. Over on the East Coast, we have Jason Markowitz. Jason, how you doing, man? Ready for tonight's show?
I'm doing well. A bit sick here tonight, so I have a lot of tissues. I'm trying not to cough. I'm trying to work that mute button a bit here. So good luck to everyone and not hearing me sniffling and stuff like that. So we shall see how that goes.
Well, don't sneeze into the mic because then, obviously then I'll get sick.
Might catch something.
Yeah, exactly. It's just fine right there. Over in Guadalajara, we have Tom Marshall. Tom, are you sick too, or should I be worried about that as well?
I've got CCL fever, Cesar. That's what I've got. Sorry. Bad run it.
Oh, my God.
It's not the best.
Anyway, I'm all right.
We're kicking Tom off the show after tonight's episode. We also have a special guest. We have James Grossi from Toronto. He's a contributor to MLSsoccer.com. James, thanks so much for joining the show. Thanks so much for talking a little bit about the CCL.
No, it's my pleasure, guys. I'm always up to talk some footy.
Yeah. All right, so tonight's big question, James, it's up to you. You could take part in this big question or not if you would like. It's a little segment we have where we ask just like a big talking point heading into the week. But here's a big question. Once again, it's up to you. You don't have to answer it if you would want to. But what are the proper steps for dealing with a full-on hashtag CCL fever? And I'll start with Jason on this. Jason, how would you deal with a CCL fever?
Well, it's easy to catch it. It's been exciting. We've had some nice games, and but I think really just focusing on CONCACAF officiating. I think that could really take the fever level excitement and just kind of bring it down a few notches. Because after you kind of really take a close look at the officiating, you might get a little bummed out, and the fever might pass. So I think that's probably rest, obviously, that kind of stuff. But I think just really focusing on the officiating will really get that done.
Focusing on the officiating, yeah, I agree. I think that might push away any kind of fever that I would have as well. Tom, do you have CCL fever, and if so, how are you dealing with it?
I don't know. I don't think there's a cure. It's all full on these days. It used to be easy to deal with when the Mexican teams just went through pretty easily, and then you just got on with it, and then it became a Copa MX, and then that was it. But this time it looks like there's some real competition. So yeah, it's going to be interesting. I don't think it's going anywhere.
I think for me, it's clearly you got to go through this 12-step program when it comes to CCL fever. Step one, you admit that you're watching CCL. Step two, you pray to the soccer.
Some research.
You pray to the soccer gods that that they'll bring you back to sanity. Obviously, it's step 4 or 5, whatever. Who cares about this? But step 12, you have some sort of spiritual awakening and just kind of like learning from the mistakes from watching the CCL. James, what are the you don't have to answer this if you don't want to, but for you, what are the proper steps for dealing with a full-on CCL fever?
Oh, there's only one cure for CCL fever, man, and that's more CCL.
Yeah. Fair the dog approach.
Jason, did we get any response from social media? We were talking about it before the show. We posted it on Twitter. I think we got one pretty good response. I don't know if we've got anything else recently.
Pretty much not. I think this question was highly reviled on Twitter, but we had the Vapo Rub response, which is it's kind of the cure-all for just about any ailment you might have. So that's always a good one.
That was a fantastic one. I think I like that one on Twitter. All right, so once again, guys, so for today's pod, we're going to be talking about clearly America versus Toronto. We're going to talk later on. We're going to talk with Austin Fido, who's going to join the show. He's going to talk to us about the New York Red Bulls against Chivas. We're going to be looking at some of the big topics regarding the CCL, and then talk a little bit about the Mexicans abroad, the Europeos over there in the old continent. But let's jump into it. Guys, let's talk about the first leg. I think I think it'd be fair to say a lot of fans were surprised, at least Mexico fans and Liga MX fans were surprised to see Toronto get the 3-1 win. I want to go straight to James on this. What stood out to you from that match? When you look back at that first leg, what really comes to mind?
I think the thing that stood out to me the most in terms of Toronto FC in particular was the way that we've seen them grow into this tournament. When the first 20 minutes we saw against Tigres, they were sort of up against it. They were pinged back, and Tigres was sort of playing the ball around at their will. And the first 20 minutes against Club America was a very different outfit. You know, Toronto's got a couple matches under their belt now. They came out there, and I wouldn't necessarily say they went toe-to-toe, but they didn't look timid the way that they did against Tigres. And that had a big difference in the game, scoring the penalty kick or winning the penalty kick a couple minutes in. So that was my major takeaway from the first little couple minutes of the first leg.
No, 100% agree. Jason, anything that stood out to you from that match?
Yeah, similar. I mean, I think the thing that jumped out to me the most was just the breakneck pace of everything.
Yeah.
Just the intensity that was displayed on both sides of the field from both teams, and yeah, I agree. I mean, I was just fairly evenly back and forth, kind of boxers meeting at the middle, slugging back and forth. I mean, it was intense stuff, and it definitely it didn't look like the first leg of a semifinal, right? It looked like a much bigger match than it was.
I mean, it's kind of what I've been, really waiting for in a CCL matchup, because sometimes it could be a little bit dull, but it was clear that there was a lot of, I don't know, is it fair to say, like, emotional intensity from both sides in that match? And I, as someone who just really wants this series to get a lot better, wants this competition to be a little bit more exciting, I think that was exactly what it needed. So I was pretty happy with it, to be honest. But Tom, I mean, anything from the first leg?
I mean, I think the quality, because I mean, we can have exciting games, but I think this is, for me, what Toronto's brought to this competition. I mean, I know Red Bulls fans will have a different perspective, but I think it's Toronto FC that's caught the attention of Mexico fans, and I think it's the way they play. James was hinting at it. Then they took the ball. I was at the Estadio Universitario for the second leg against Tigres. One of the things that stood out, I mean, it doesn't sound like a lot, but from the kickoff, Toronto kept the ball. And they worked the ball around, and they worked it into Tigres' half. And I mean, that's takes confidence to do that away at Tigres. And obviously in the second against America last week, I mean, it was a good game. You just knew, and you had the feeling that both these teams can do each other damage. I mean, it just any moment you knew something one could strike. But I think I do think the pitch was a shame. I think the same with the Tigres.
Both teams had to deal with that, though.
100%, but I mean, it's Toronto's home ground, so you expect them to be more used to it. And I think most Mexican teams are very much passing teams. I'm not saying Toronto aren't, but when you're not used to it, it's very difficult to deal with. But I thought it was a top game, and the halftime, everything kicked off, and I don't know, it felt like a real game, and the kind of event occasion that this tournament needs.
Yeah, I mean, James, Tom, Jason, and I can talk about Tigres for Tigres, Club America for quite some time here. But I want to know from your perspective. I mean, what worked well for Toronto, and how were they able to find that success?
Well, something that they sort of talked about pre-match going into the Club America series, and that they noticed was especially different compared to Tigres was. Vanny sort of said that he noticed Club America tended to let their side get separate, whereas Tigres moved as a group and there was a unison movement around the field. With Club America, there was more of a willingness to set their 5 or 6 attackers forward and attack, and leave the other 4 or 5 at the back in order to defend in units. And he got the sense that if Toronto could bypass that first bit of pressure and get in behind, they would find some joy utilizing that space. And if you have a guy like Sebastian Jovinko up front, you have a guy like Josie Altidore, getting them in one-on-one situations with any defender is always going to sort of play into your advantage. And we saw that on the penalty kick, we saw that on Josie's goal right before halftime. And so I think that was something that Vanny sort of foresaw and told us about in the couple of days leading into the game, and that we saw play out in that first half for sure.
Guys, before we start looking at tomorrow's second leg, I mean, we got to talk about Piojo. Tom, just give us some update. I mean, there's just always something crazy that Piojo has been saying recently, and I feel like we got to talk about that. I mean, Tom, just give a little bit of a quick review about what he has said so far.
Well, if anybody thought that Piojo Herrera was going to kind of, after that kind of post-match conference when he might have been still a bit, pumped up with adrenaline and stuff, that after that he would kind of reflect and kind of calm down a little bit, not happened.
Nope.
Absolutely not happened. I mean, he gave an interview with Fox last week, basically repeating the same thing, saying that the police at the stadium and the security treated his players badly, that he wants CONCACAF to do something. He also said for some reason that, MLS is improving, blah, blah, blah. Obviously they've got the 3 designated players, but he also said, but also they're doing stuff under the table. For example, they've got Zlatan Ibrahimovic in. I mean, this is on record, him saying it. They got Zlatan in. Obviously he's making a lot less compared to he was making at Manchester United. So, it's obvious they're giving him you could get Sully. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's just basically saying that MLS is sliding him money from somewhere else. So anyway, at the press conference today, he was like basically they, and I don't know who he meant by they. I assume it's CONCACAF. He's like saying they want a fuerzas in Spanish, so like they want to force a gringo team. He actually used the word gringo, into the final of this tournament, and it's I just don't know why you're saying that. I don't know. This is a guy he's not.
I think I do. It's because it's Piojo, Tom.
Yeah, I mean it is. But this is the thing I don't get sometimes about. Well, I do. You're right. I do get it, but he's been an international manager. He's 50 years old. Like, do you not learn? Don't use the word gringo. I mean, for a start, you're playing against a Canadian team, which is a bit.
It's probably all the same to Piojo. For him, it's probably all the same to him.
But I mean, don't you? I mean, he should have enough experience to just know that is bad PR. Don't use it. What's the point? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, we've talked about before on the podcast. We've talked about on the Counter to Russia podcast. I mean, obviously, Piojo has matured in a tactical sense, but off the field, he's the same Piojo, and I doubt he will ever change, unfortunately. Guys, let's look at the second leg. James, I want to get your perspective here a little bit on Toronto's preparation, because I mean, not only did they not have a game over the weekend, but I mean, if I'm reading this correctly, they've been in Mexico since Thursday, correct?
Yeah, they traveled down early with the couple of days that they had before the match, so they've been making the most of it, trying to get acclimated for the altitude.
Nice. And for you, go ahead, sorry.
Oh, sorry. They also spent a lot of their preseason down in Mexico City. So I mean, part of the plan was getting a lay for the land and getting a feel for what it was like, and so they've been taking advantage of this for as long as they can, and they've been planning for this. There were images coming out of the training ground over the last few weeks of guys on exercise bikes with oxygen masks on, and so they've been doing some of that at high altitude training for a good 10 days or so. So it'll be interesting to see if it kicks in around the hour mark like it usually does.
Yeah. And James, really quick, sorry, Tom, but really quickly, James, do you expect any changes from Toronto going into the second leg, whether it be tactically, whether it just be from the 11?
As far as the 11 goes, I think one of the remarkable things about that first leg win was that you could make the argument that Toronto did it without 3 of their starters. Victor Vasquez wasn't available, Chris Mavinga was out, and so was Justin Morrow, who's their starting left back and was in the best 11 for MLS last year, and so he's been very coy about whether any of them are available this week, who's fit and who's not, and so we're not quite certain who's going to be available, but if I were to make one change out of those 3, I think Chris Mavinga coming in if Chris Mavinga is fit, he slots right back into that 11 at the left-sided center back position in the back 3, and he gives you such a dynamic defender who can eat up ground and make defensive plays that he should not be able to pull off. So having him back would be a huge boost for the side.
Yeah. He was particularly good against Tigres before he came off, for me anyways. But James, what's the Toronto take on, obviously on the pitch it was a good game, and I expect, in the Azteca I think it's going to be a really, really good game, but the off the field stuff, it seems like Herrera's just not stopped talking like we were just saying, but Greg Varney's kind of been a bit more chilled out. I mean, he's given his side. He said, look, I don't think my players have done anything bad, but what's the kind of inside information on how Toronto are viewing what's gone on off the field and how they plan to deal with it against, it could be a full Azteca tomorrow. Yeah,
it's interesting because they've seen that before too. Last year in the playoffs, they had a bit of a tunnel incident with the New York Red Bulls, and Vanny said his piece. It's a bit of an interesting construction in that tunnel. I can get into the layout with you in a bit. Vanny's very good at. He said his piece post match when Herrera's comments were brought to his attention, and he adamantly defended the Toronto police in terms of whether he thought they would actually assault a visiting player or not. But you know, they're very much focused. Him and Bradley are the ones that have been speaking for the most part over the last couple of weeks, and they've sort of swept that all away. And it was very much the same with the Red Bulls incident. You know, Josie Altidore sort of had a looming suspension hanging over his head for a good 10, 12 days in between series. And the club was very adamant that they were in the right, and then they just sort of pushed that to the side and focused on the match. And so, you know, Herrera can say what he wants, and Toronto's not really going to get drawn into a battle of remarks with Herrera. They're just going to focus on the 90 minutes, I think.
Yeah, I hope not. I hope that's 100%. Jason, go ahead, Tom.
No, just going to, James, like, what's the, you know, obviously you get a sense of what's going on in MLS and stuff, but how, you know, what Toronto FC's done, you know, the last couple of years, I mean, how much of an example for other MLS teams, not just in terms of the CONCACAF Champions League, but in general? I mean, this team that you just look through the backbone of the team and you know it's a proper team. You know, it's not a team that looks like it's going to give away a game easily. How much of an example has TFC become for, you know, for all of MLS, really?
I think very much so, in the sense that they've used every tool that MLS rosters have at their disposal in order to bring players in. You know, they've left no stone unturned, and they've used every mechanism you can think of. You know, look at a guy like Marky Delgado, who's really grown into a fantastic professional at his young age and made his debut for the U.S. national team a couple of weeks ago. They picked him up in a dispersal draft when Chivas USA was disbanded, and they were picking 12th. So there were 11 teams that picked before them, and I think 7 passed. And so just sort of having that ability to spot talent and to nurture it, but also to bring pieces together. And you know, for all the great players that they have on this team, and you know, it's hard to look past a guy like Jovinko and not say he's one of the best players to play in MLS over the past 5 years or whatever.
Better than Jermaine Defoe.
Yes, yeah, Jermaine. When Jermaine was happy to be here, he was excellent, and he was very enjoyable to watch. But I think it didn't quite settle here the way that Jovinko has. You know. For all the big names that they brought in, everybody has bought into this sort of team ethos and the mentality that Greg Vanney and Michael Bradley have sort of instilled at the leadership of this club. And so, you know, whether it's using all the mechanisms or being willing to spend the money on the big players when the opportunity comes about, I think the most important thing is they've built a cohesive unit. And one of the things that I found remarkable, especially missing those 3 starters that I mentioned in the last game, is sort of how quickly and easily other guys have slotted into those roles, and the side barely missed a beat. You know, a couple of years ago, if an MLS team was missing 3 of its starters and going up, everyone would have been losing their minds, you know. Yeah. And Toronto came out of that with a 3-1 win, which is kind of unbelievable. You know?
I was going to ask Jason a question, but first I'm going to go back to one more question for James here. I mean, James, is it true? I mean, we've talked about it on the Mexican Soccer Show in the past that there are reports of this. I don't know if it's true or not. I'm sure you would know, but is there actually a designated spot at TFC headquarters where they're waiting for that CCL trophy? Is it true that's actually there?
Yeah, I walked by it just a couple of days ago, last time I was up at the training ground. And so you walk into the dressing room, and there's sort of a reception area, and there's stairs that go up to where there's a team lounge, and there's a cafeteria, and there's meeting rooms and everything like that. And so inside that big lobby, if you look up and to your left, there are 3 glass windows, and those windows open up to cases that are part of the players' lounge. And one of them is for the MLS Cup, one of them is for the Voyageurs Cup, the Canadian Championship here, and the other one, the only one that's empty right now, is for the CONCACAF Champions League.
Says a lot about their ambition right there. Jason, let's go back to Liga MX. I mean, America, clearly, going into this with a little bit of a disadvantage, but you know, what's the key for victory here for them? And when I say victory, I mean, clearly we're not just saying a 1-0 win, because that wouldn't be enough. So what can America do here?
I mean, I think that, like, if I'm an American supporter, which I'm not, but if I was, I would. The thing that would concern me, and the thing I'd really look for in these big matches under this manager, Pio Herrera, the thing that I'd always look out for is the temperament of the squad and keeping a level head and keeping a cool head. So we've seen America in these big matches, especially at home, in front of that home crowd, push and get too aggressive, get too physical, get too chippy, end up getting tons of cards, end up getting themselves some reds, and just getting carried away and getting lost in the match. We've seen it so many times in these big matches. So that's the thing for America. I think just staying calm, getting their goals. They'll have plenty of opportunities. Obviously, I think there's some things to work out with the back line, and that wealth of space that was in between the midfield and the back line that Toronto was able to capitalize on the first leg, kind of closing it out. Figuring out the right time to push that back line up and keep them back, I think that's going to be the key. But just keeping calm, keeping cool, knowing that chances will come at some point during that match. If they don't come in the first half, that they'll have more chances in the second half. I think that's going to be key for America.
Yeah. But yeah, I think the thing you said, Jason, about there is a worry that it spills over, and I agree. I also think that it can work exactly the opposite way. I mean, for me, this is Toronto FC's biggest. This is the biggest test. You know, the America as a club promoted this game. You know, they put it online. Everybody who went to America against Cruz Azul have got a free ticket for this game. You know, it's at 9 o'clock, which is a really good time in Mexico for people leaving work. The fans are going to put in a tifo, like a big banner thing when the teams come out. America has won this tournament 7 times. America does not want in any way to lose in the Azteca to an MLS team. It'd be embarrassing. And you can imagine on the Mexican talk shows, they'd just get absolutely battered. And I think the stadium can fire them up as well. I mean, I really think that there's going to be a huge amount of energy and momentum created by the crowd. And it's, I mean, if America can get an early goal, then it'll be massive. And then it's going to be another test for Toronto FC. And for me, a little bit more difficult even than Tigres, because a full Azteca with America playing and dealing with that is a challenge.
And if you can get past Tigres, you can get past America. Just give them the title at that point, right? I mean, after I feel like the last 2 series have already been like 2 finals in themselves. I feel bad for Toronto here. All right, James, we're gonna let you go in just a second, but we have one more question here. It's actually gonna involve everyone else. We just want a prediction. What's gonna be the scoreline tomorrow, and who's heading to the final?
Yeah, you know, I'm terrible at predictions. Let me just say that first off. It's always a bit of a fool's errand, sort of trying to forecast exactly how things are going to go.
100% agree.
So I'm feeling like it's going to be a 2-1 final. I can see Club America taking the win at home, but I see Toronto just getting enough to squeak by in this. They've had a knack for getting through these 2-legged series. It's not always pretty, but somehow they managed to make it through. I think if you look back over the last 2 years plus, they've gone through in 10 of the last 2-legged series they've been in. So, you know, it's not always beautiful, it's not always lovely, but they usually get the job done.
All right, Jason, what's your prediction?
I was actually thinking the same. I think it could be a 1-1, 2-1. I have Toronto going through. I think America could get the 1-goal victory, but I don't think they're going to make the full comeback. I could see it going either way, but I think Toronto prevails.
Yeah, I'm going the same. I just think that extra goal that Toronto got was massive. I think if it was 2-1, you know, I'd put it probably even, if not America's slight favorite with the away goal. But as it stands, I'd say Toronto favorites to go through. I think America will win the game. I think it's going to be similar to that Tigres game where Toronto score goals, at least 1 goal, and then obviously it becomes so much more difficult.
I mean, just for the sake of being devil's advocate, I would love to disagree with you guys, but I don't want to be wrong also. And then for people to like to point it out on Twitter. So I'm just going to go ahead and agree with you guys because I think that's a practical, rational decision. I do think that America is going to win, but I think in the end, I mean, just those 3 goals that Toronto got in the first leg, I mean, those are so crucial for them. And I think that'll push them through to the final. Once again, James, thanks so much for joining us. Thanks so much for putting up with us. I know we had a little bit of a hard time trying to get you to join on the show, but I mean, I feel like that's just like a rite of passage for the Mexican soccer shows. You deal with this like convoluted setup. It's not a Skype call. You have to like click on a link. It's weird. But thank you so much, James. And where can we find you and follow you whether it be on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, where can we find you?
On Twitter, I'm at Grossi. It's a bit of a bastardization of my last name. It's Grawsee, and you can find my writing at MLSsoccer.com, and I do a bit for SB Nation's Waking the Red as well. And it's been a pleasure being on, guys. Sorry about the technical difficulties, but I'm sure next time will be better.
Like I said, it's just a rite of passage, man. Thanks so much. Thanks so much,
Thanks,
man.
James. Thank you.
All right, thanks a lot, guys. Enjoy the game.
You too.
All right, so once again, that game is tomorrow at 7 p.m. at least Pacific time. So I guess that'd be 5 p.m. Mexico time and Central time between America and Toronto FC. Guys, let's talk about Patreon really quickly. Obviously, for supporting the Mexican Soccer Show, you got patreon.com/the Mexican Soccer Show. You can find the Countdown to Russia podcast. You can find actually. So Tom, this week we're gonna have a Countdown to Russia podcast that's specific about just questions that you guys send us. So far, we've had 3 so far. For all those patrons who are $5 plus patrons, you feel free to send them in, and Tom and I will spend, whether it be 30 minutes, whether it be 4 hours. I'm kidding. We're not going to be on for 4 hours. That'd be too much. But we've been on for almost an hour and a half, 2 hours before in the past. We'll see what happens. But
get some IPAs in there, sister.
Tom,
you're hoppy IPAs, and we'll be all right.
You've been in love. You've been in love with those IPAs since your visit to San
When
Diego.
do I get invited on this show? I mean, you guys are gonna be cracking up with the IPAs. Like, what's going on here?
Well, you got to step. You got to visit me and you visit me in San Diego, and then after that, then you can jump on the show.
I see.
So once again, patreon.com/the Mexican Soccer Show. For those patrons who have we're at the level where you can get the t-shirts. Those t-shirts are on their way. I don't know if I'm gonna get one. I'm getting one, right? I have no. Well, I guess I'm leaving the Countdown to Russia podcast.
Sorry,
officially after this. All right, guys, let's talk about New York Red. Let's move on. Let's talk about New York Red Bulls versus Chivas. And to talk about the Red Bulls, we have a special guest. We have Austin Fido. He's editor for oncemetro.com, a Red Bull specific SB Nation site. Austin, thanks so much for joining the pod.
Thanks very much for having me.
Yeah, looking forward to talking about Chivas versus New York Red Bulls. Let me go straight to Austin on this because I've already heard enough from Jason and Tom. They're a little annoying. Austin, let's talk about that first leg. Chivas getting the 1-0 win. What stood out to you, at least from a Red Bulls perspective? What stood out to you from that first leg?
I think immediately after the match, there was a grievance, really. Felt like a couple of things didn't really go our way. And we could have, maybe got more out of the game if we'd gone with, if the penalty had been called, for example, or obviously if Tyler Adams hadn't slipped up. So initially it was that sense of grievance. I think subsequently, after with a little more time to reflect, the Red Bulls have talked about how they felt comfortable enough with the match, felt like they got what they went there to get, aside from one little mistake. And with hindsight, they were closer than I expected them to be. I thought they would take the same sort of battering that they got from Tijuana. And that really didn't materialize. So I'm sort of more encouraged now than I was before.
Jason, I mean, it looked like the Red Bulls kind of played conservatively. Do you think that was the correct approach against a Chivas side, especially who haven't exactly been at their best this season?
Yeah, I don't think. I mean, there's some logic to it. Traveling to Guadalajara, playing the pragmatic approach, it makes some sense. And Red Bulls are a team that seem to be able to absorb pretty well. But that being said, I think maybe it was a little too conservative because, I mean, looking at this Chivas team, this is a team that you can give them plenty of scoring opportunities. They're not necessarily going to score. So I think you could come out and spread yourself out a little bit more and try to capitalize on some of the strengths that you do have. So Red Bulls team is pretty strong, like we saw against Tijuana. And I don't know. I think it might have been a little too conservative. It makes sense. It's not like it was a totally wrong approach, but I think they gave up a little too much to Chivas, and they didn't necessarily need to give up that much.
Yeah, I mean, I thought Chivas were the better team in the first half, but then in the second half, I thought Red Bulls came into it a lot more until they got that red card, and then obviously it was a bit more difficult. But I think what Chivas did really well, and Austin can talk about it as well, but they stopped Bradley Wright Phillips getting the ball in the box, and I think he had 2 shots. One of them was a mistake from Pereira, and the other one, I think it was from outside the area, and it was wide. And I mean, I think Jair Pereira was absolutely key because Pereira's a physically big guy. He's probably, by far the best Chivas player in the air. And I just wonder how Chivas are going to be able to stop that happening away. I think that's the crucial issue for me because Carlos Salcido comes in, mobility ability-wise, he's not as good as Pereira in the air. I don't know. It's just a concern that for Chivas.
Actually, also, I wanted to ask you that. Is it as simple as stopping Bradley Wright Phillips? Because I was following the series against Xolos because I was over here at Tijuana. I was watching that game. I mean, clearly, Luis Robles had a huge role. I mean, just that incredible performance he had in the Estadio Caliente. That's the best goalkeeping performance I've seen in that stadium. But it seemed like the key there in the attack was just undoubtedly Bradley Wright Phillips. Is it just, if you shut him down, does that really stop almost a lot of the attacking effort from Red Bulls?
It can feel that way sometimes, but no. In theory and in practice, I mean, last season we got double-digit goals out of Daniel Roya. He hasn't got going to quite the same extent just yet. Obviously, they're banking on Kaku being a little bit more of a kind of all-action, make goals, score goals, do whatever he needs to do to get goals on the board sort of player. We haven't seen anything really of the best of Kaku because we haven't really seen Kaku playing with what we consider to be the first team just yet. And there are other pieces in the squad as well. I mean, Sean Davis isn't terrible at getting the odd goal or two. Alex Muil, maligned as he is, pops up from time to time. At some point, we'll either see the best of Derek Etienne or he'll go on somewhere else where he can produce that. But yes, I would say at times it can feel like stopping BWP is the key to stopping the Red Bulls. And the trick for the Red Bulls is when a team is able to do that, the other players have to step up.
All right, guys. What's
the perception of Chivas up there?
I think twofold. I think starting out, before we played them, I think there was a sort of cautious respect for them, both for the reputation of the club and the idea that this was going to be a stronger test than Tijuana. I think there's been a little bit of bravado since the first leg because we didn't get beaten all that badly. And it feels a bit weird to celebrate a loss, not least because the last time we were in Mexico we were coming back with a win. I do think the shine has come off Chivas a little bit. That front four that they're able to put out looks very, very frightening on paper. But I think a lot of fans feel like maybe we've seen the best that they've got to offer, and we survived.
Yeah. Guys, let's look ahead to tomorrow's second leg. That'll be over here 5 p.m. Pacific time, 8 p.m. Eastern. Of course, that'll be over at Red Bull Arena. Tom, obviously you follow Chivas a lot more. I mean, I'm just looking at the weather, and I'm just looking at the fact that there's going to be raining with a chance of snow out there, if I remember correctly. It's going to be like in the low 30s, at least for me, from a California perspective. It looks ridiculous. But, I mean, whether it be due to the weather, whether it be due to Liga MX schedule, I mean, how prepared do you think Chivas are for the second leg?
Not amazingly prepared, to be honest. I mean, Chivas have travelled a lot of late, and I think Matias Almeida got a lot of criticism here for playing kind of a reserve team basically against Veracruz on Saturday. But I mean, this team over the last few weeks have played in Dominican Republic, I think in the round of 16. Then they've gone to Seattle. They've gone to Texas in the international break to have at least one friendly there. I mean, they've travelled around a lot, and this is a really. It's not a big squad. I mean, it's basically been the same players playing every game.
And they got to go to Tijuana. They got to go to Tijuana next Friday too.
Yeah, I mean, but in terms of this game, I think they're not where they want to be. There's a lot of tired players, but on the other side of things, this is a club now that under Matias Almeida, I think they've got to 6 semi-finals. They've won a title. They've won 2 Copa MX titles under him. They're not going to be kind of daunted by going there and playing a semi-final. I think Chivas will try and take the game to New York Red Bulls as best they can, and I don't think they're going to be. I think they'll be confident. I do worry aerially without Jair Pereira. I think that's massive. And Almeida was saying today that he was thinking about playing 3 centre backs. But then when the news about Pereira came through, he changed the plan, and that was strange though.
Isn't Edgardo Marin also like a doubt for the match too? Like, so I'm wondering what 3 center backs could even start.
No, I mean, it would have been Pereira, Salcido, and Alanis, but yeah, I mean, I think that's but I do think the big advantage Chivas have got is the away goal rule. Yeah. I think the fact New York Red Bulls didn't score and Chivas have got that 1 goal advantage. I mean, for me, I can see Chivas scoring a goal and then it just becomes so much more difficult for the opposition. But expecting just another, like the first leg, just really, really tight game, and it's going to be. I just think there's going to be a minimal difference.
Yeah. Before I go back to Austin with another question, I mean, Jason, I mean, from your perspective, obviously, just almost like as a neutral fan watching both sides, I mean, do you feel as if Chivas have a little bit of an advantage here because of that lone goal, or do you think that they still need to be a little bit more cautious, say let's say like with a Toronto with their like 3-1 lead? Oh, Jason, can you hear me? Hello?
Back now.
Sorry, I think you're gone for a second there.
I was totally missed the question.
Oh, sorry. I was just saying, like, you as opposed to someone who is like a fan from either team, just like after you saw that first leg, what are your thoughts? I mean, specifically on Chivas. I mean, it's just a narrow advantage they have there, but are they really going into this with much of an advantage?
Yeah, it's not as big an advantage as I think they needed going into this. I think it's gonna be tough for them to play in the stadium. I think the weather's going to be tough, and I think they just have trouble scoring goals. I mean, this is what we know from Chivas all the time, and that we've mentioned it several times already. But Jair missing out is a massive deal. Yep. Carlos Salcido going into that back line is really troubling, and I don't know. I think Chivas are going to have to strike early and often. I mean, for all the advantage that they had, I think they had 6 shots, 3 on target in that first game, with all that possession. And, I don't see as much in the second leg. I think Red Bulls are going to take it to them, like we saw them take it to the Xolos. And I'm a little bit worried for Chivas in this one. I don't, it's basic and it's cliche, but I mean, they're just going to have to capitalize on those opportunities that they don't often do, but they're going to need it because I think Red Bulls are going to score their goals.
Austin, what's the expected atmosphere of this match? Because, of course, from Liga MX's perspective, you see a lot of Chivas fans saying, like, oh, my God, this is going to be a Chivas home game. It's going to be a Chivas home game. I mean, is there any truth to that? Is it? I mean, what are your thoughts for tomorrow?
I think that's what everyone's expecting. It's going to be dominated by Chivas fans. The Red Bulls fans who are there will have a certain degree of home advantage. Obviously, our supporters groups will be congregated in the usual area and hopefully make them. Well, they don't usually have any trouble making themselves heard. But the expectation is that it's going to be predominantly Chivas fans. Even the players seem to expect that. Earlier in the week, BWP was saying it would be a little weird given that it's our home stadium, but they've clearly been told to prepare for that possibility.
And do you feel like fans are kind of up for it? Like the Red Bulls fans have really bought into this competition, bought into this, the fact they're going up against this club that claims 40 million fans and, massive institution.
Oh, I think so. Absolutely. I think it may not necessarily reflect itself in attendance, but certainly the fans who are there and the fans who are watching, not least because the Red Bulls, let's be honest, have not had a great amount of success. So the idea that we're going toe-to-toe with Chivas in the Champions League semi-finals, no MLS team has won this yet. We're still in the mix. I think people are genuinely very excited. And obviously, only going to get more so if we get past Chivas.
And then from your perspective, I mean, just looking at the second leg, I mean, what would you say the keys to victory here for the Red Bulls against a Chivas side that have a 1-0 advantage right now?
Well, obviously, we need to score more goals. I think to get that done, they're going to play a more aggressive formation. So they're then going to dispense, I would imagine, with the third centre back. So it'll be 4 at the back. The wing backs will be more aggressive. That means we'll hopefully get more width. Big question is whether Kaku will start. Mm-hmm. Doesn't sound like Jesse thinks he's ready yet, but Jesse Marsch likes to spring a surprise or two. And it wouldn't be the biggest surprise if the guy they paid $6 million to land makes his true first team debut. He's played for the first team before, but never really in a full strength side. So if he made his true first team debut in this game, that would actually make a lot of sense. At least they kept him off the field entirely in the first leg, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, probably especially against a team like Chivas, it's stylistically more what he's been used to before, no?
Yeah.
Yeah,
it looks like.
I think. Sorry, I think what he adds that we don't necessarily have as well represented in the squad is that kind of creative, technical player who can do things in one-on-one situations. And they've been talking up all week their analysis of Chivas, which is that they're a strong man marking side, and so those one-on-one battles, I think they're going to be seeking them out and seeking to win them. And Kaku's a guy I would pick if that was what I was in the mood to do.
And then we have a question here in our live chat from someone called JM. I'm convinced it's just Jason, just pretending to be someone on the chat.
Or Jesse Marsh. I mean,
it could be Jesse Marsh. But yeah. they said, well, Red Bull's coach, Jesse Marsh, stick with the long ball, or they play out of the back as they usually do because they're at home.
Do they? I think the long ball is a standard part of our arsenal. It fits our tactic. We're not afraid to use it. We're not married to it, but I mean, it meets exactly what we want to achieve. We want to get the ball forward quickly, and we want to create difficult situations in the final third that challenge defenses and cause them to make hopefully rash decisions. So I see no reason not to expect long balls out of the back. Not all the time, but it'll be there, and it'll be on the regular, I'm sure.
All right, guys. So just to wrap up this section, let's go with predictions. I'll first go to Tom and Jason, then we'll go to Austin here for the predictions. So Tom, prediction for tomorrow. Chivas going to go through? Are they going to get a win here? What's going to happen, Tom? What do you think?
I've got same score as the first game. I think Red Bulls will win 2-1 and Chivas through on away goals. I don't know. I just think there's not much between these two teams, as we saw in the first leg. And if Chivas can get that goal, then it makes it pretty difficult. But minimal differences here.
Okay, Jason, do you agree? You disagree?
I'm trying to come up with a new score because every time I keep coming up with the same exact scores. Whoever went before me, but I was thinking the same thing.
We're all too pragmatic. We need someone with the crazy. Be like, yeah, Chivas, they're gonna ganar. It's gonna be 5-0, blah blah. It's like...
All right, I'll mix it because I don't feel confident in this completely. So I'm just gonna say 2-0 Red Bulls.
Okay.
I have no confidence in Chivas scoring goals. I think they can get the opportunities, but I'm not sure they'll convert them. So I'm gonna say 2-0 Red Bulls, and Red Bulls go through.
Ooh, okay. I'm going to stick with a 1-1 draw, and Chivas just sneak on by. I think I wouldn't be surprised if Red Bulls got a goal here. But at the same time, I think Chivas got a goal here, but at the same time, I'm not really convinced by their attack that they can get more than just one right there.
The only thing I'd say about Chivas that I don't think we mentioned is that when it comes to these big games, Almeida pumps them up. He gets them ready, and they haven't failed in a lot of big games. I mean, they've been pretty bad consistently for most of this year, but when it comes to the big occasions, they usually kind of step up.
We do worry about Pereira not being there, don't you? I mean, it's just
it's big.
I feel like that's so, especially because I feel like every time I watch Chivas, I feel like Pereira is such a fantastic leader for that squad as well. So. No comments. I thought Tom was going to comment there. Never mind. All right. All right. So let's. So obviously, Austin, prediction for tomorrow.
Well, the head is inclined to agree with Tom and say 2-1. That would be very sort of typical of the team's experience in big competitions. We'll go out as losing by winning, but. I'll be optimistic, and I'll give you your crazy prediction. We'll win 4-0.
Whoa!
Yeah,
you heard it here. That's what we were looking for. That's exactly what we
Big difference between the head and the heart there.
This is the story of my unfortunate life.
Well, Austin, thanks so much for joining us. Tell our listeners where you can find and follow you, whether on social media or whatnot.
Sure, you can find my writing at Once a Metro, the SB Nation blog focused on the Red Bulls, and you can find me on Twitter at Canetop. That's CANETOP.
CANETOP. Thanks so much, Austin, and maybe we'll be chatting soon. Let's see what happens in tomorrow's match.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks very much, guys.
Thanks, Austin. Thanks for coming on.
You.
All right, guys. So now we gotta go on to. Let's see. We got a little section. We got about like a little. Let's say like about 10 minutes left in the show. We've got a few questions here, a few topics to discuss regarding the CCL. I will just go straight into it. A few big talking points. So the first one is this. So where do we stand on the new format for the season? Is this what has helped the competition so far? Jason.
I mean, I think the new format is great. I mean, avoiding those group stage matches. I mean, it's highly beneficial for MLS teams and Liga MX teams. It was not a part of the tournament that I think fans could get really interested in. I think when you have a part of a tournament like this that is just, it's not as high quality. There's not as interest in the matches that it could bring the whole tournament down and kind of like lower the standard you're expecting from the whole tournament in general. I don't think that it has a major impact on the play. I think the play that we've seen this time comes down to the teams that are involved. I think Tom mentioned earlier, I think it really comes down to what Toronto has brought to the table in this tournament has made it. Not necessarily the format, but the format is good. Overall, it's a good advancement for the CONCACAF Champions League.
I mean, thank God that group stage is gone, right? That was just
yeah, it was pointless because you're getting teams just so vastly inferior. I know Chivas a few years ago went out against a team from Guatemala, but I don't know. There's no interest, and I think what's happened here is that basically we've just gone straight to the real stuff. I mean, straight knockout football only lasts a couple of months, so all the teams are invested in it because all the teams know you go in at around a 16 and they separate the Liga MX and MLS basically, and then it's the quarterfinal, and the idea of the quarterfinal is for MLS versus Liga MX, and it builds it. And I think the MLS, the way it started a couple of weeks later, I think the MLS teams are more informed. MLS teams are obviously improving as well with the TAM money and all that kind of thing. And yeah, look at these two games now. I mean, look at the hype that's surrounding these games compared to what we've seen previously. I mean, Piojo, we talked about his comments, but Almeida said about the Pereira suspension, he said it seems really strange, even more so because we're a team with Mexicans, and he's using the they. It's uncomfortable for them that a team with only Mexicans might be able to reach the final or might get to the final. Jair Pereira. Lately Mexican teams have been in the Club World Cup, and I think that now they again want to have a team from the United States. Look at what's going on right now outside the Chivas Hotel on social media. Chivas fans, massive banners in New York. What's going on in the Azteca? Hopefully it's going to fill up tomorrow. I mean, these are real kind of occasions, and the kind of the kind of games between teams from different countries that are finally hyped up and exciting and I think more than anything competitive. I mean, that's the key. I mean, it wouldn't be as exciting if Chivas have won 4-0 and just superior, the better team by a long way in that first leg. I mean, it just wouldn't have the same hype around it. And the same with Club America and Toronto. Toronto have earned respect with what they've done so far, and America need to play a really, really good game to avoid what for me, I'll repeat it, would be a really embarrassing exit of this competition.
Yeah, I'm pretty happy with the new setup. Like I said, the just group stage was pretty boring. I mean, I didn't really care. I mean, just as a fan. The only thing I do have a problem with is as a setup of the teams that have already qualified. I mean, you look at the 2019 CONCACAF Champions League, and you already have the 2017 Apertura champions, Tigres, and the 2017 Apertura runners-up, Monterrey, already getting a spot. So it's a little confusing just the way that it was set up. I understand it's a little complicated, but that two teams from 2017 have already qualified to the 2019 CCL. It's a little weird. I feel like we somehow need to take a little break and just reset everything. But whatever. I guess as long as you have Tigres and Monterrey there, I mean, that does pretty well to represent Liga MX. Here's another question, guys. Clearly, MLS teams were given the weekend to prepare. We talked about Toronto being in Mexico since Thursday. I don't know anything about the Red Bulls, but I assume they're probably out there training as well. And I guess a question here worth asking is Liga MX doing its part, to really help the teams prepare for the CCL? Or Tom.
Well, just quickly, I think, it's one of those, it's kind of like the Copa Libertadores where, everybody would like Mexican teams to be in Copa Libertadores, but then you look at the calendar and you think, well, actually, it's not possible right now. And I think it's the same with...
There'd be no space. Like, where would you put those games?
Yeah, I mean, there's no space for Liga MX teams to have a weekend off, But at the same time, I don't know why Chivas can't kind of swap the game in Tijuana next week on Friday which they weren't allowed to do. I mean, there's certain things you could do to make it a lot easier. And sometimes I don't feel the Liga MX, does enough. But why would you do anything when you win every year? I mean, they don't care. Which I'm sure we'll talk about later. What it would mean if an MLS team did win.
I feel like
that's exactly right. If Liga MX didn't do it for Copa Libertadores, they're not doing it for CONCACAF Champions League. It's not that hard to take 1 or 2 matches and reschedule them for a Wednesday at some point. I mean, it can be done. It's tough. It's tough with the control that the media companies have in Mexico to take those big marquee teams away from the weekend and schedule them on another night. But I mean, it's not that difficult to do. But if it wasn't done for Libertadores, it's not happening for CONCACAF Champions League. No.
Why would we change if everything is working? Feels like a bigger theme regarding Liga MX.
That's the mono, I think. Yeah.
All right, Jason. Let's start burning through a few more of these questions. I mean, Jason. So with increased competition for Major League Soccer, I mean, will this tournament gain prominence? Would you believe it'll gain prominence within Mexico?
I think maybe MLS winning the tournament could start to generate some interest in kind of getting the tournament back, winning back. But I think it still has a long way to go. There's not a lot else, without the Libertadores there. The international competition's lacking. Getting to that Club World Cup is a big deal for that team to face against Real Madrid or Barcelona or something like that. I still think it has a ways to go to really become like a marquee, something that is widely popular in Mexico outside of like the individual teams' fan bases. I think it has a ways to go.
Tom, somewhat related to that question, but I mean, is the gap closing? Do you think the gap has closed?
Yeah, I think so. I just think it's kind of that what's it called? The target, the TAM money is obviously, helps them out a lot. Obviously when you've got 3 designated players, and it's a point that Piojo Herrera has been stressing. I mean, these teams have got money. You look how much Michael Bradley gets paid, Altidore, Giovinco. I mean, somebody said on my Twitter the other day, about Giovinco. He's like, no Liga MX club can afford Giovinco. I mean, MLS plays ridiculous salaries to players that couldn't. I mean, who else would pay Michael Bradley what he earns there? Exactly. And it only works in MLS. It's a bit like Vela and Gio as well. Let's not let's not get on the high horse about it. But yeah, it's narrowing. It's I think Toronto is kind of an outlier to a degree, because I think they're a very, very good team. And like I said, you look down the spine, and we're comparing Toronto against Tigres and against America, and I think if you compare it, it's quite fair. You know what I mean? Because what we're always looking for on both sides, it's quite interesting on Twitter and stuff how people kind of they back one side or they back the other side. But really, if you were to conduct an experiment, which kind of league is best, and you took Toronto, the best team in MLS, and then you took the best teams in Liga MX, you'd pick Tigres and probably America next, maybe Monterrey, but experiment really. And Toronto was so far held up really, really well. So, I think that's evidence to point to the fact that the gap is closing. Is it there yet? No, of course not. I think the Mexican league throughout the league is at a better standard, and let's not rule out a Clásico Nacional final yet. Yeah, I mean, exactly. America can win 2-0. I mean, that's something that can happen. It would take a very good game from America, but there's not a big difference between these 2 teams. Well, the 4 teams over the 2 semis.
Not to focus on this too much. What I'm somewhat bothered about, I'm going to be bothered about inevitable. It's going to be like what happens in the future is that if the Liga MX clubs go through, then all of the closing the gap arguments are just going to vanish. The gap is closing, and I think Jason, you mentioned, and I agree with you. I think it was, I don't know if it was the last pod or the pod before that, but you mentioned that regardless of what happens, whether it be 2 MLS clubs, whether it be Chivas, against America, the gap is closing. Whether it be the Red Bulls who somehow lift the title, or whether it be Chivas who lift the title, I think the gap is closing. That's something to recognize, and I'm already predicting being angry no matter what happens, because once again, if MLS clubs go through, or if one MLS club goes through, then yeah, everyone's gonna just take it like a little too far, and you're going to see people saying like MLS is now superior to Liga MX. This is incredible. We're at an incredible point in our league, and then like just wait until Zlatan goes against those Liga MX clubs, and then we'll easily win. And then from like Liga MX perspective, if Liga MX wins, the fans are going to say like, no, MLS was never closing the gap. They're 30 years behind. Blah blah. I don't know.
The lesson is always to stay off Twitter, I think.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. I think that's the theme. Stay off Twitter.
The thing that really jumps out to me, and I think from a national team perspective, you know, the relationship between the U.S. national team and the Mexican national team, I think U.S. is at a low, obviously, right now, missing on the World Cup. I look at these two teams, and the players that really jump out to me are these young U.S. players that are in line in this next generation for the U.S. national team, like Marky Delgado that was mentioned at the beginning from James. I mean, such an amazing player, young U.S. player.
Mexican-American player, if I remember correctly.
He is. But like just incredible player. Yeah, but like just connecting the passes, just incredible player jumped out. And then you look at Tyler Adams on the Red Bulls, just an amazing player in that midfield. That's going to be such an important player for the men's national team. So it's interesting to see some of these players coming up in these big matches that could be kind of competing in that U.S.-Mexico rivalry in the future in the national team capacity.
All right, guys, let's we're already 5 minutes past 8 o'clock over here. I'm getting tired, getting sleepy, but still we need to cover one more topic here. Let's just do it a few more minutes if you guys are all right with this. So I think the way we'll deal with this is you guys are all three of us are going to discuss one noteworthy player from the Mexicans abroad. We can't ignore the Mexicans abroad. We haven't even talked about Liga MX, but I think we got to talk about the Mexicans abroad here. So Tom, one noteworthy figure from the Mexicans, but I feel like you got a few options here to discuss. But I mean, I know we're doing a complete 180 here after the CCL talk, but I feel like we got to sneak this in here. Tom, from the Mexicans.
I'm going with the less obvious one, and it's Marco Fabian. I believe he played his first night football country in a competition since May last year. He's not completed 30 minutes. We know Fabian as well, and you know, we know he's had his injury problems and he's been in and out. But you know, it's almost a year since he completed a full 90 minutes, and I just think that's a massive boost because I think that, and we've talked about it on the countdown to Russia. I think Marco Fabian, if he comes into this World Cup with some form behind him, can be a big player, and specifically
could be the number 10. Could be the number 10 for Mexico if they need a number 10.
Well, I think what's going to happen is when Mexico plays Sweden, Marco Fabian's going to come in. That's my prediction there. And so obviously to see Marco Fabian play some minutes, 90 minutes, it was massive. And yeah, it was obviously only a draw, but you know, Eintracht Frankfurt are a good team, and for Fabian to have won over once again, Kovac is really good news for him.
Jason, I mean, you've got a few other options here to choose from. What sticks out to you when it comes to the Mexicans abroad?
I want to talk Raul Jimenez with the goals. You know, the continual concern with him at Benfica is the minutes. He's just not getting the starts, a few minutes here and there, and it's not seeming to matter. Cesar, you referenced him as potential Mexico super sub in the World Cup, and it's looking pretty good. He's got the ability to come in and mix up the forward line and really punch him in, and it's proving to be a solid option if there's some reason that Chicharito's not in there, if he needs to be used in a different formation for whatever reason, if there's some rotations possible. Raul Jimenez is looking more and more like maybe we don't have to be all that worried about the minutes because at least for now, he's getting it done.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to cheat here, and I'm going to bring up two players. I'm going to bring up Chucky Lozano first because he got a goal and assist. The assist, everyone blindly just said he had an assist, but if you look at it, he had like he took a free kick from like, it must have been like 30 yards out. It happened to land to, I forget the play that it landed to. So it wasn't like a beautiful pass. It just, whatever. Regardless, it was an assist. You got to give credit to Chucky. You got to give credit to Chucky to what he's done so far this season. From Opta Johan. It's kind of funny because there's like the Opta Jose, there's like the Opta John. It's kind of like specific different regions, but Opta Johan. He is the first PSV player to get 15 Eredivisie goals in his debut season since 2001. So credit to Chucky. He's just been doing incredible out there, and it's going to be exciting to see the form that he hits going into the World Cup. And of course, I got to talk about Chicharito. Chicharito, who has been, I mean, I feel like if there's ever a player who is desperate for a goal, it's got to be him. He got the equalizer against Chelsea. Clearly, he likes scoring against Chelsea. If I remember correctly, I saw an article that said that that's the 9th time that he scored against him. And I think 6 times have come off the bench. So credit to Chicharito for getting that goal. And hopefully he can find a little bit more form because, of course, the conversation regarding whether him or Jimenez is only going to continue as the months go on. I think Chicharito should be the starter, but Jimenez is going to make it difficult for him right there. Should we talk about Briseño's goal for Florenzi at the bottom of the Portuguese tape? No one seems excited for this. No, Briseño. We're not putting him on the plane to Russia. No, I mean, if we have some injury problems, boom, right there, Boyo Briseño, just like right there. All right, guys. Yeah, I mean, I guess we're almost 70 minutes into the show, so I think we should wrap up. Let's see, who should we have close out? I'll have Tom close out since Jason's sick and might be passing out any point soon. So Tom, let's wrap up here. Whether it be about the CONCACAF Champions League, whether about Liga MX, what about L3? Give us your final thoughts before we close out.
I'm going to go back to a subject we talked about, Piojo Herrera, about all these comments that he's been saying after the game against Toronto, the first leg. You kind of, he was pumped up, still kind of on adrenaline after that. But for him to continue with the same kind of themes, the same topics, I mean, I just think that he hasn't learned from why he got fired from the Mexican national team. This is a guy who says he wants to return to the Mexican national team. The new president of the Mexican Federation after the World Cup, Yon de Luisa, was his boss at America in a very successful period for the club. His chances, as soon as that announcement was made, rocketed. But once again, I think this week has shown how he's not ready to be on the international stage. I mean, it's okay when it's kind of domestically in Mexico, or it seems okay. It's not really okay, but at least it's contained within Mexico. And then what happens when it goes on the international stage? It's like he just doesn't have that filter. And it's a shame because in terms of on the pitch, he's a good manager, but I don't think he's just not got that. It's almost maturity to filter out what he's saying, and it's been a bit of a shame. Having said that, I tell you what, in the Azteca against Toronto, forget, it might have been a bit embarrassing, he might have been mocked in places, but I can guarantee you, he'll have them players fired up. And I think tomorrow's game in the Azteca is going to be absolutely superb.
Yeah, well, I can't wait to see Piojo complaining about the scheduling for the 2022 World Cup once he's there in charge of the national team, and just complaining about the fact that it'll be during the winter. But guys, thanks so much. Thank you everyone who was on the chat. I feel like I usually bring up a few more comments, but I know I did a terrible job of that, so that's all on me. But yeah, we'll see you all next week, and of course, keep an eye on the Countdown to Russia podcast. Once again, if you're one of the $5 plus Patreon supporters, send in your questions. Tom and I will just spend the whole podcast answering your questions regarding L3. And until next time, we'll see you on the next edition of the Mexican Sock Show. Have a good night, guys.